Why did City Council President Clarissa Pena use police force to kick me out of a meeting?
This is your second warning, so
My warning?
yes,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you got a warning earlier, and then, yeah.
That's honest mistake.
So if you can escort him out, it's going to be your third warning, so you're escorted out,
Clarification on why you're removing.
because those are the rules.
I don't believe they are, though.
Okay, well, they are. Are we going to have to recess again?
You might have to, I'm just asking a question.
Thomas Abeyta got escorted out after bringing up an email he says is from City Councilor Dan Lewis. We obtained a screenshot of that email but haven't had time to authenticate it. Abeyta claimed Lewis is working with apartment associations to kill the city's minimum wage increase proposal.
Why did she threaten to sue me?
The reason you want this bill passed is because you do not like the amount of scrutiny you are under as one of the most bribed politicians in Albuquerque history.
Madam President, that concludes comment. Thank you.
So I guess I have a question for our city attorneys. When people make statements up here, it's public comment, we all kind of absorb it and take it in and just kind of ignore statements that are being made. When people are making false accusations, is there libel for some people when they're doing that?
Why did Dan Lewis say I'm not a journalist? The answer is very simple. There are 3 sicknesses that are going to destroy this country: unlimited bribery, unlimited war, and unlimited debt. We are going to be talking about the first one that plagues my city and it plagues your city too. Unlimited bribery has been legalized in this country. Your local city councilors are bought and paid for by the businesses in your very city, by the contractors who live outside your city and want to move in. Everything that happens in your city politics is because someone has paid for it to happen. And that is the reality of all American politics. I first became really aware of this when I started to engage in politics locally here in my city. And when I immediately started to call out my local politicians for the way they take bribes from organizations like the National Realtors Fund, which is a fund based out of Chicago, not here in my city of Albuquerque, which dumps hundreds of thousands of dollars into elections in order to control our city council and make sure they get preferential access to our government. On June 1st, I went to city council to talk about the minimum wage bill that was being proposed. My city, for the first time, was considering a $15 minimum wage. And I, of course, knew all too well that City Council had already decided that they weren't going to pass a $15 minimum wage. I knew that the restaurant organizations in my city had already been funding the elections and campaigns of those who were in office, and all they want to do is spend their money on campaigns, not their employees. Well, I was right. The Restaurant Association was able to pass its amendments, and what actually ended up happening in my city is a $15 minimum wage got turned into a $13 minimum wage next year. How did these concessions happen? On January 21st, I went to a city council meeting where we were talking about the ability to pass tenant protections because one of the councilors had proposed a bill that would have made it harder to give application fees and kick people out on short notice, some things like that. But when I went to that meeting, here's where the game begins. What happens is there's a bill that's going to hurt local businesses in some capacity, at least their profits. And the way that they protect themselves is they go to their city councilors, whom they've bought off, and they say, can you pass some amendments to essentially nullify the bill, to get rid of any teeth that may hurt local businesses in favor of the constituents who want this kind of policy.
I would also like all the city councilors to check your email. I just sent you a text message from Josh Price, who's sitting right up there from the Greater Albuquerque Area Realtor Association. Here is my big issue. Josh just texted a big group chat, Dan Lewis, told him, we're going to try to get rid of those fees for you. And I heard him talk about that over the thing. This is what I'm talking about. You guys are owned by your funders, your donors, and the moneyed interests. So if you'd like to go look at your email, you'll find that text message from Dan Lewis, from Josh Price, who says Dan Lewis was going to try to fight these fees. And what does he do? Just a few minutes later, he tries to get an amendment going to waive the fees. Guys, the fees are the important thing. That's what keeps people honest.
Yeah,
whether it be the realtors or many other groups, they recommended all kinds of amendments to this bill. I can tell you that this amendment did not come from anybody other than, that was my understanding that there was an amendment like this. When I saw that there wasn't, I proposed it for the sake of discussion. So I'm going to withdraw the amendment. Thank you, Madam President.
Realtors have a lot of power on the city level because they build the city, and for this reason, they essentially own your government. You should look for these organizations in your city or something like them because I promise you, it exists. In my city, it's called GAR and NAOP and the Apartment Association of New Mexico. These three organizations, at least in my city, own pretty much the entire government. This bill I knew would die. And when I went there, I was shocked to see one of the members of GAR had a text message that essentially said Dan Lewis had agreed to pass legislation that helped them. It was going to, and this is the game that is played in every city, your city especially. A developer does not like something that they see on the law. So what they do is they get one of their city councilors who they've already bought off, and they get them to directly change the legislation. This is dangerous stuff. Don't believe me? Well, look at this email from Councilor Dan Lewis in my city. He tells Steve Grant of the Apartment Association of New Mexico that he can literally delete and write lines of legislation for something he doesn't like. But what he offered as an alternative was to let Steve Grant write legislation via email from City Councilor Dan Lewis, and he would just pass that on as his own ideas and law. That is where we're at. Donors and lobbyists literally tell your politician what laws to delete and what laws to write. That's how bad it's gotten. Now, I discovered these emails in an IPRA request, and I brought them to City Council with the intention of sharing them with the City Council, and more importantly, pressuring Dan Lewis about this subject, considering the fact that he's so lenient with these lobbyists, and we had a $15 minimum wage up. I wanted to go defend that. Well, what ended up happening is I presented that email to City Council, and what happened was extreme. The council president did not allow me to ask my question directly to City Councilor Dan Lewis. Police force was immediately used to remove me from city chambers. City Council should be a place where people go in order to express their ideas and openly say what they feel as constituents, safely, about the legislation being proposed that would affect them. But what I found is that if you do not obey rules from the 1800s that say that you must direct a question to the council president, not just talk to any council member that you see there, the police force will be used to remove you. Now, I have a feeling that police are not supposed to be used in order to remove a public commenter who's asking a direct question of another city councilor. That seems like excessive force. Now, of course, I discovered that this was protecting Dan Lewis. The last time I appeared in City Council, I was allowed to ask a direct question to my own councilor, Councilor Rogers.
Madam Chair, if he speaks through you and the councilor wishes to answer the question, that would be fine. People have done that in the past.
Okay. But the rule does say that
they have to speak through the chair.
I think it should be clear. My question is not for the chair. My question is for my representative, whom I voted for, and I do not.
Mr. Abeyta, we understand what you're trying to do, but there are procedural things that we have as a council, and so I'm telling you that if she wishes to answer your question, she could. The rule is that she would have to make a motion, but I guess we have set precedents that we have not done that. So if she says you can ask her a direct question, and she's indicated that you can, you can.
In that case, if I could ask a quick direct question to you, Councilor Rogers.
Madam President, I believe that the speaker's time is up.
Okay, but most of my time was spent listening to them debate. My comment was not her speaking to me. My comment is a question. May I ask you a question, Rogers?
So your time is up. I'm sorry.
Councilor Rogers, would you mind making a motion to suspend the rules to allow me to ask you this question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like you to ask your question through the chair, and then I'd be happy to answer it through our council rules. I have to, as a member of this body, I honor our rules, which we talked about when we met, that you can absolutely ask me any questions, but it must be through the chair, and then I ask to be recognized. That's the process, and the chair can choose to recognize me or not, And if I wish to push the issue, then I'd have to challenge the rule of the chair, and then we would have to take a vote. But to avoid all of that, all you have to do is say, Madam Chair, ask your question of me. I can ask her to answer. I'm sure she would oblige, and then we could move on.
Well,
And then I'm going to go back to, it's not public, it's not discussion, it's public comment, so she does not have to answer your question.
understood. Well, on that,
And your time is up, so I don't know, Councilor Rogers, do you want to allow for more time?
Thank you, Madam President, as long as we follow the rules through the chair.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer any questions that are directed through our chair.
Okay, well,
I voted for her. She represents me. And when I even went to her in a private meeting, she told me that what she thought would happen to me was wrong. And she probably would have expressed that opinion to me had the city's lawyers not stepped in and said that she should not speak on my removal with police because it might potentially be part of litigation.
Madam Chair, would you please ask my representative, Councillor Rogers, why it is that I have to avoid my constitutional right to ask questions of my representatives here in this City Council chamber, and I have to direct my questions through you, and why is it that when I failed to do so, police force is used to remove me from the building, and it is dangerously used to prohibit my free speech and my ability as a journalist to ask you direct questions when you might not be able to get away from them? I understand you don't have an obligation to answer them, but it would be nice to know why I was removed forcibly with police force last time I was here, what we can do to stop that from ever happening again, and why Dan Lewis is protected from questions he doesn't want to answer. He can't answer that.
Madam President,
thank you.
I would advise that we not answer questions that could be a matter of litigation.
Thank you. So, Councilor Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because this is wrapped up in active litigation, I would agree with our legal counsel.
The city lawyers literally told my own representation not to answer my questions publicly because it could potentially put the city at risk of lawsuit when I was the one who was directly harmed by the police. My representation is not even allowed to represent me, but your representation is absolutely allowed to take as much money as they want from these realtors and these restaurant associations and these contractors, and they will pass bills on their behalf. Make no mistake, your politicians do not serve you. They serve the people who fund their campaigns. Now, City Councilor Dan Lewis is going to come to me and say, look, I'm publicly funded. Now, I want you to look at a little blatant lie that is printed all over the place and changes elections. Look at this very strange disclaimer. This says that this campaign material that is supporting Councilor Lewis and is supporting Councilor Pena here in my city are not actually associated to them. Now, here's what's strange. We have emails between these guys, like Jim Strotz here, who is a local contractor here and has donated to Clarissa Pena's firm, and again, has his organization has donated to NAOP, which is donated to this Chicago Realtor Fund that I told you about at the beginning. All of these people are donors to this organization, which prints this campaign material. Now, it says it's not associated to them, but these guys are literally going to these people's offices. Here's an email where one guy says, I need to take this offline so we can go to the city councilor's office and talk about it in person. But yet I'm supposed to believe that when they spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars to print mailers and campaign material for this guy, that they have no association to one another, that he didn't know about it and they didn't know about it, and he's still allowed to take our taxpayer dollars and run his campaign. Dan Lewis loves to say that he's publicly funded, but his friends that he goes golfing with, that he lets come over to his office and carpool to his office, these people also give money to his campaign via these unassociated contributions. I don't believe it. I don't believe that money is speech, and I think when corporations spend vast amounts of their property in order to support a campaign, that is a transfer of property. That's not a corporation using its free speech. It's one person giving property to another person, and that is bribery, and it's legalized in this country. Now, I think the bigger concern here isn't just the fact that your politicians are bribed, but it's when you start bringing this narrative to them that they get really hostile. When I said that the president of my city council was bribed, she openly threatened to sue me for libel. Of course, no lawsuit has ever come because it is not libel to say that a politician is bribed because I disagree with the rulings of Citizen United. And even more concerning, they are willing to use police force to remove you if you do something wrong. I'm not the only one. This is happening in my city council and multiple times. There was another activist who was removed pretty recently from a city council meeting that you can see here. And the same day I was removed, there was another person who was removed from city council that day. I wasn't the first person for police to have to escort out of the building.
I believe she demonstrated weak and poor leadership. And she did what all weak leaders do. She turned to authoritarianism to attempt to control. Weak leaders do not understand that freedoms cannot be controlled. If the city council believes that clamping down on free speech and limiting the right to redress government is the best way to hide what they're up to, they don't want to answer questions, and they're having these votes at midnight, which has been not a unique thing to this year. This has been for many, many, many years. And if this particular Albuquerque City Council and Albuquerque City Council President thinks that that is going to be the way to limit accountability, then they are fools.
I think this police force that's being used against public commenters like myself in city council is a result of these politicians not wanting to answer to journalism. I received an email from Dan Lewis where he said to me, "I'm not a real journalist. I'm an activist, and I should stop calling myself a journalist." Well, Dan Lewis, I am an activist, and I'm also a journalist, and it's called movement journalism. And I do get to publish my work quite often in the Daily Lobo. I've been published in the Albuquerque Journal. And for that reason, me, this non-journalist that you call a fake journalist, would love if my first writing of this next semester could be with you. I would love to publish an interview between you and I, Dan Lewis, in the Daily Lobo, our local university's paper. I think that would be really good for me as a journalist to prove to you I am a journalist, and as you keep saying, you have answered every one of my questions. You even asked that I post that full email of yours in this video. Well, here's the full email, Dan Lewis, so everyone can read it, and what they can read is that I'm not a journalist, and that you've always answered my questions. Now, I think that's a little ironic, because you didn't even answer the question I had asked you in the email prior, and you certainly didn't answer the question that I had asked when police had removed me. So, I will be answering that same question that I asked when the police removed me. Are you actually representing your constituents in District 5, or are you representing those in GAR, AANM, and NAOP, who you've said in emails that they can write and delete legislation at their whim? That's my question for you, Dan Lewis. I asked it to you once. You never answered it. And now that you've said you've always answered questions and are open to questions, I'd love to interview you for the Daily Lobo around this question. So where does this story go? Probably nowhere. Our cities are going to keep getting corrupted until something breaks. Or we just live in such an apocalyptic society that the rich people own every square foot of our cities, and we have no ability to stop the bribery from taking over. It's a pretty dark situation, but hopefully I don't get sued for libel like I keep getting threatened by Councilor Pena. Hopefully I am able to get an interview with Dan Lewis with the Daily Lobo like he keeps saying is so easy to do, and our politicians will actually eventually be reliable to us as voters, and maybe one day they'll actually represent their constituents instead of those who fund their campaigns. I don't think this problem is going to get better before it gets worse. It's far more likely that our politicians are going to keep getting more and more bribed, and to the point it's absolutely silly that we have literal owners of restaurants and developers walking around our city council as if they're regular people representing constituents. Unless people start to care about their city politics, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, this is going to be a real bummer for us.